In the 19th century, two orphaned sisters, Ginger and Brigette, ride a horse through an icy cold forest. They eventually get lost and walk around trying to find a clue to find their way back. While at it, they discover a tent that looks like it was attacked by a beast. A native woman shows up out of nowhere and says a prophecy regarding the two sisters. She hands them a necklace each, and while at it, Ginger has a vision of a face. Immediately, their horse starts freaking out and it runs off, so they pursue it, but it escapes. The girls are completely lost, and with their mode of transportation gone, they wander about. Unfortunately, Brigette's leg gets caught in a trap, so Ginger runs back to find help. As soon as she leaves, Brigette hears the sound of a wolf approaching, so she starts trembling. The wolf shows its face, and a Native American shows up not too far away. The duo terrifies Brigette, and when Ginger senses the unfamiliar presence, she runs back and attacks the man. She tries again, but he ties her up with a rope and then goes over to Brigette. The terrified girl sees the man with an axe and tearfully accepts her demise. To her surprise, he didn't harm her. Instead, he rescues her from the trap and applies some herbs to her wounds. The indigene then tells the girls to follow him. Ginger picks up the stick she used to attack the man and uses it as support as she holds her sister while they follow him. He takes them to his fortress where they are let inside. As the girls walk in, they are looked at wearily. Upon being spotted by another group, the people readily carry their weapons, but a sergeant major steps in. He chides the man who lets them in and slaps him when Ginger tries to speak up. A different man named Rollins tells the sergeant to stand down. He walks to the girls and asks Brigette to show him her wounds. She shows him, and they explain that she got it from a trap in the woods, but was rescued by the indigene. The girls informed the man that they were accompanying their parents, but then their boats turned over and they were washed ashore. Unfortunately for them, their parents drowned. A reverend father who stood there observing the girls advised Rollins to cast the girls out, a behavior countering his clothing. After the reverend leaves, Rollins lets the girls stay. He takes them to the village doctor, Murphy. The man examines Brigette's injured leg and tells her that she'll have a scar. He brings out leeches from a jar and puts them on her leg despite the girl not wanting it. After the procedure was carried out, Rollins introduced himself as the chief of the village. He tells them that they'll be having dinner to officially welcome them that evening. After he leaves, Ginger watches as Murphy uses a sedative on her sister to make her rest easy while her injuries are being tended to. She then sees him using the sedative on himself and asks him why. Murphy explains to her that it is used by the villagers to help them sleep well. Confused, Ginger asks him what they are so afraid of, so he throws her another question, wondering if she didn't see the creatures in the woods. The girl refutes spotting anything, and rather than the doctor pestering her for answers, he tells her that she was definitely spotted by the so-called terrors. After the treatment, the girls speak to an attendant. Ginger asks where the rest of the people are, but the man says that they haven't returned for months since they set out to get supplies. They also questioned him, asking if there's a path for them to take on foot, and he tells them that it's a few thousand miles. He takes them to a room and informs them that it used to be for Rollins's late son Jeffrey, who died a few weeks ago. Having shown them where they'll be sleeping, the attendant says they'll meet at dinner time. After he leaves, Brigette complains about their condition, but Ginger tries to be positive about it. The night sets in and the girls are ushered into the dining hall. There the Reverend prays for the meal. Spotting Ginger's lackluster attitude, Gilbert increases his prayer. Eventually, Ginger cuts in with an amen, and he is forced to stop. The men hurriedly dig into their meals, and one of them tells the girls to enjoy the food while it lasts. They are running out of supplies, but some believe that more will come. Suddenly, the Red Indian who saved Brigette earlier shows up and drops the jaw of a wild animal he hunted. Some men praise him while the sergeant major insults him, thinking he doesn't understand. The man then walks to meet the hunter and asks him if he's playing two roles. The hunter gets mad and pins the sergeant major to the wall, then talks some sense to him, reminding him to know his place. Rollins looks at an image of his late wife and son and recites a prayer. While at it, Gilbert talks to him and tells him that there's no need for them to stay in that fortress. Rollins refutes the priest, but he is interrupted by howls from outside. Immediately, he tells them that dinner time is over. The girls walk to their room, and on their way, they see the priest. The man tells them that the monsters outside are demons. While speaking to them, he indirectly refers to them as the people awaiting judgment from the monsters. Before going to sleep, the girls examine some of Jeffrey's toys. They eventually sleep, and Ginger has a premonition, waking her up. She gets a jar of water and takes a lamp with her. Ginger leaves her room and goes into the dark passage. There she looked for anyone she could speak to but couldn't find someone. She comes across a painting and looks through the torn fabric. There she spots a figure. It is of a small child, but the figure acted strange. In the process, Ginger is bitten. As early as possible, she wakes Brigette up, telling her that where they are is bad news, and they need to leave. She shows her sister the place she got bitten, and they pack their things to leave the place. On their way, Ginger picks up a sword and holds it as they walk out of the house. Not too far from the gates, the girls hide and try to run away, but they are stopped by Sergeant Major. The man smacks them and prepares to throw hands at Ginger, but Brigette stops him by pointing a gun at him. She urges him to let them go. Just as he is about to send them off, the wolves bite the Major's hand and pin it in between the doors. A colleague tries to save him, and he gets himself wrapped in the same situation. The girls try to use the commotion to their advantage and sneak away, but Gilbert sees them and pretends to hear them. He shoots his gun and locks them inside a house. With one of the doors opened, the wolf almost gets an entrance into the building, but the girls struggle to defend the place. Thanks to the Native Americans who killed it, they'd have been snacks for the hungry creatures. As soon as they get out of the house, they spot Rollins and the other men, so the girls yell at him, saying that the Reverend tried to kill them. The man then commands them to go back to their room. After they leave, Ginger has a nosebleed. In their room, Brigette cleans her sister's bleeding nose, and after a while, they fall asleep. When Ginger wakes up, she sees that Brigette is not in the room, so she looks for her. The native hunter sees her and then pins her to the wall. He then dresses her wounds. But she has a vision of her sister's corpse. When they stop kissing, the Red Indian's mouth is covered in blood. She suddenly wakes up and finds herself covered in blood from the injury she got on her shoulder when she was bitten. Brigette wraps her in clothes and takes her to the sick bay. There they spot the attendant feasting on the leeches. The doctor comes in after them and points his gun at him, saying he should place a leech on his chest. The attendant hesitates, and as soon as he does it, the leech sucks his blood violently and grows bigger, causing him excruciating pain, so he screams. Immediately, the doctor shoots him down. He walks outside with the girls and tells the chief that Marcus is the attendant. During the attack, they manage to take down one of the werewolves, and after examining it, it was one of their men. Inside, Ginger tells her sister that she's been bitten. Somewhere else, one of the men goes to a basement and drops food for someone to eat. He sees a pendant on the floor. Time passes, and the men bury their dead. On a certain day, the sisters discover the boy who bit Ginger is Wallace's son, Jeffrey. The time draws closer to the full moon. Then a man has a sound in the chimney and checks it out. He brings out a knife. He climbs the attic, and there Jeffrey attacks him. That night, the men check the house and find a strand of Ginger's hair near the victim. It was the one Jeffrey stole from Ginger when he came to her room. The men immediately bundle Ginger and take her to the doctor, Murphy, to test her. Then Brigette was pinned down by Sergeant James on the bed. Wallace then enters and takes her away from him. This is thanks to the deal which he made about her keeping quiet regarding Jeffrey's case. He then takes her to Murphy's place and sees that they are about to test Ginger. He points a gun at them and tells them to back down. Seeing how obstinate Murphy is, he shoots him and chases the rest of the men out of the place. He then releases Ginger from the bind. Determined to kill Jeffrey, Ginger finds him mourning at his mother's grave. She takes a knife and confronts him as he holds his dead mother's hands. From somewhere not too far away, a man shoots at them, and the two of them run away from the scene. In Jeffrey's room, the hunter meets with Brigette, and she gets all defensive around him. He then informs her that he could have killed them many times with the chances he had, but he didn't. He asks that they follow him and leave the fortress. They look outside the window and see that Jeffrey has been captured by the men. They drag him in a rope and get close to a fire. James and the Reverend point their guns to the freak, and they discover it's Roland's son. James calls for him, shouting his name repeatedly. The chief finally comes out with his gun, and behind him is Brigette, who looks surprised that the cat is out of the bag. He walks towards his caged son while speaking to the men who call him a liar and points his gun at them. The man then stoops to the ground and stares at the hideous freak of a son. As the child runs off to jump into a well, Rollins shoots him and he falls into it. After that, The men shut up and obey his order to bring the boy's body out of the well. The surprised girls escape through the opening on the walls while Roland supervises them. As soon as the girls go out into the woods, they see a native. The girls scatter around in the forest and they see wolves. Along the line, the native is attacked, but Ginger suffers as she tries to control her urges to stay sane, thanks to Brigitte, who walks her into a cave. The inside is decorated with candles to illuminate the surroundings. They then spot the elderly seer who tells them that they went against her warning, which was to kill the boy before he bit her. She tells them that it's too late, but Brigitte pleads with her and she tells them to follow her. As for the hunter, he and his wolf get to the entrance of the cave, but the animal growls wearily and it even barks. They enter the cave and the natives discuss with the girls. The elderly Cree seer reveals the sisters' coming had long been prophesied, and that the red and the black would decide the destiny of the werewolf bloodline. Brigitte's palm is cut, and her blood is put into the flames. It burns a different color. She is then given a concoction to drink by the elder, and as soon as she does, she enters a trance-like state and has a vision of her destiny. In the trance, Brigitte walks into the scattered tent she and her sister saw earlier with her knife and sees the corpse of the elder's sister. The scenery changes and she's back at the entrance of the fortress. There is a black werewolf. Within seconds, it transforms into her sister. She then spots the hunter trying to kill her, but she stabs Ginger in the chest, killing her in the process. She then wakes up and sees the elder to have been killed. She rushes to meet the hunter and tells him about her trance. He quickly equips himself and leads the way. He hands her a knife and tells her it's the only way. Eventually, they are led back to the fort, and there it dawns on her that she's been tricked by the hunter. The men seize her and take her inside. On that night, it is a full moon. In the building, the Reverend speaks to her, telling her to beg for forgiveness, but she gets enraged, resulting in her spitting on him. Angrily, he drags her outside and slams her on the ground, calling her a witch. He prepares to burn her because she rejects his mercy. The hunter, on the other hand, waits patiently with a bow in his hand for Ginger to turn up. They hear her at the door, and she is led into the fort. As the Reverend prepares to ignite Brigitte, the hunter shoots his arm. As soon as Ginger is let through the gate, she demands for her sister from the men. Immediately, James and 2 other men pounce on her, beating her without mercy. On the other side, Rollins walks to the priest and stands him in the hut before setting him ablaze. He asks for forgiveness from God before carrying out this vile act. Gilbert screams as he burns, but he eventually falls and goes quiet. The rest of the men continue to corner Ginger. James moves closer to her to hear what she's about to say, but he hears a distant howl, indicating the sound of a werewolf. With his attention divided, Ginger slashes his throat and opens the door for werewolves to pour into the fort. The monsters attack the men without mercy, shredding them to bits. Some try to shoot the monsters down, but they are mowed in the process. Other werewolves go to the front of the chief's house and they start attacking. One leaps at the Rollins, but the hunter shoots it and scares it off before it can kill the chief. The injured man brings out a knife and frees the tied-up lady. She quickly grabs a torch and uses it to scare the wolves. One of them appears in her blind spot, but the hunter uses his axe to kill it. She holds the flames of torches to keep herself at bay, but the werewolves aren't afraid of the flame anymore. Meanwhile, Rollins sets his house ablaze and walks to pick a nearby gun. He points it to his neck and pulls the trigger. Outside, the hunter saves Brigitte with his arrows, but he gets attacked in the process. She spots the injured hunter and stabs him as soon as she sees her sister. She then runs to reunite with her before they flee the vicinity. The whole fort is set ablaze, but the siblings escape just in time. Outside in the snow, Brigitte says she's cold. She looks at her sister and then mixes her blood with her sister's, infecting herself in the process.